Why don't I start on that? With respect to the high-speed rail system, as you know, the project itself is scheduled to be done in phases. And so there's an element, the initial operating segment, that we hope to complete by 2022, what we call the Beta Basin phase in 2026, and then the final Phase 1 concluded by 2029. And so what you have as you get into an operating mode and you start operating the system is you have less emission reduction on the front and more on the back. In July of last year, the High Speed Rail Authority submitted to the legislature a GHG reduction report estimating what those reductions will be. What I have in front of me today is sort of a cumulative figure, and we can provide you with whatever else you may need in that area. But by 2022, it's about 140,000 metric ton reduction of GHG, or removing 29,000 cars from the roadway equivalent. And then it goes up as you phase, and ridership goes up and increases through the progress of the project. So we're 140,000 in 2022, up to 380,000 by 2026, 580 by 2029, and by the time you're into 2030 and 2040, the cumulative figure for reduction is in excess of 11 million metric tons total, which is the equivalent of reducing about 2.4 million cars. As I said at the outset, because you've seen dramatic mode shift around the globe and other places where you've instituted high-speed rail, that does come with GHG reduction benefits, and that is empirical data that we get from other countries and see. And so those are the numbers that I have in front of me now. Again, we did submit to the High-Speed Rail Authority did submit to the legislature in July of 2013 a more detailed plan and report for that, and I can provide you with any additional information you need, but those are the figures I have before me today.
So let me ask you, I think one of the kind of the tough burning questions, at least in my mind, and coming from Southern California, where we have acknowledged some of the worst traffic congestion in the world, if not in the country. How do you and have you balanced the relative value of expenditures on the high-speed rail, the statewide level, versus the benefit that might be achieved by investing more at the local level?
That's an analysis that I have here today, but I would say that what we're trying to achieve conceptually with the project and the program is to not have one work off the other, but to have them work together. And the model that we are proposing, as I mentioned earlier, is the model that says, we're building a system here, an integrated network here. And the great achievement we have by offering an inter-regional travel alternative that would be fast, clean, and convenient, we think, again, that the data shows from other places that people will be attracted to that and people will use that system. The key part, then, is what happens when it gets into the urban cores on either end. And that's where connectivity and seamlessness matters a great deal. Our proposal before you today has that split of about 85-15% in terms of 85% on the development of high-speed rail, 15% on the connectivity or seamlessness investments that we'd make at the local level. And again, that's in addition to other investments we already make at the local level. It's a little bit more than the proportion that was in Proposition 1A. That was about a 10%, 90-10. Ours about 85-15. So I don't have analysis that says invest here or invest there, which is better. It's more of a proposal and a model that says to really get the mode shift you're looking for, to get the benefits, you need to focus on connectivity. And that's our approach.
All right. And Ms. Roberts, if you want to chime in on any of these points at any time, just look interested, and I'll call on you, or just chime in. Not that you don't look interested. I know you're always listening. Okay, I'm going to get myself in trouble here.
Mr. Bloom. Mr. Chairman, would you like me to go further in terms of the other program investments and how we're
I'd be
going to
happy
measure
for
them?
you to do
All
that
right.
and just
Thank
distract
you.
from what I just said.
Anything to let you off the hook here. I just wanted to mention that, as you had indicated earlier, the LAO also pointed this out, the Air Resources Board is requesting additional resources to further develop metrics here. All of the program areas that are shown in the budget, the general programs, are identified in the scoping plan as targets for greenhouse gas reduction, because we know in a generic way that they are sources of carbon that we need to be reducing. But to get down to the level of really being able to measure specific project investments and which of them and compare them is a level of analysis that has not been done before, and which we agree should be done. I think the question is going to be more difficult perhaps than you might anticipate, because we do want to, and I believe we've been directed to, optimize other benefits as well. We've had this discussion before about whether cost per ton of carbon reduced should be the overriding metric for making investments out of the cap-and-trade program. And we at ARB have resisted that notion, mainly because we think that if there are measurable, legitimate reductions in greenhouse gas emissions that also create other benefits that may not be achievable in other ways, that those are still investments that would be worthy of putting in the investment plan. And I would just by analogy give the example of our existing incentive programs for vehicles, where in the Carl Moyer program we have traditionally applied a metric of just cost effectiveness when it comes to who will get the grants to replace old vehicles with newer vehicles, trucks. And what happens then is that you get a trickle-down effect. You get the largest fleet owners always showing the greatest benefit because they're the biggest emitters, and therefore they get the lion's share of the funds. And by the time you get down to the single truck owner, there's not money left over for those projects. So in thinking about how we would be developing our grants program with the clean vehicle rebate and the other sustainable freight projects and so on, we're thinking about how to make a bigger impact in terms of leveraging the job potential, the economic development potential, the community benefits from going after some of those kinds of projects as well. So I think that the issue of developing metrics is not going to turn out to be to get us to a point where you can press a button and spit out the project that you're going to fund through this program. I think it will definitely get us a much better way of showing that we did achieve reductions in greenhouse gases and what they were. But I did want to make that point.
So one important follow-up question in getting to that place is understanding that each department has the ability to do that level of analysis. And can you speak to that issue and where you intend to go with it?
I think Mr. Almy may also want to address that, but I would just say the ARB is prepared. We understand that not every agency is in the business of calculating greenhouse gas emissions, and we are willing and we do feel it's appropriate to have one place that does the core analysis and keeps the records on what actually happened, and I think we are prepared to do that.
That's right. And so just to underscore that point, part of the 6 positions that Chair Nichols referenced as part of the governor's budget proposal is developing and updating the methodologies, but it's also advising then the implementing agencies about the application of those methodologies to assist them. And so that is part of the proposal. It's not just the scientific work, but it's also the advising of the implementing agencies on that.
And so that advice would be forthcoming going into the program, is that right?
Right. So it's an iterative process. So as Chair Nichols mentioned, there are a lot of current methodologies that are already in place. There are some that need to continue to be refined and updated, and some that need to be developed. So it does become an iterative process, and that's part of what the 6 positions are going to be for, is the continuing to update and advise.
Ms. Roberts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would just ask for some clarification then, and make sure that these types of metrics are being provided before those investments are being made, rather than being used as a way to evaluate outcomes. So prospectively, having the metrics in place is going to be important in order to ensure that the administration of the legislature is moving forward in a way that's most informed.
And given some of those constraints, what is the timing for getting money out the door, getting projects moving, getting all these pieces in place so that things move appropriately?
That's right. So maybe it would be good for kind of illustrative purposes to use the $20 million that the legislature already appropriated in the drought relief package as a really good model for kind of how we anticipate these programs to be implemented. So first, it's important to note that the scoping plan identified the water sector as a significant consumer of electricity and recommends that the state support additional water conservation measures. And then, given the state's drought conditions, water use efficiency measures were identified as an important component for managing the state's water needs. So notice that that water use efficiency is both a GHG reduction measure identified in the scoping plan, as well as a co-benefit, so to speak, to address the state's water needs. So they're mutually reinforcing. And so now, since it's a grant program, there was a level of uncertainty about how much GHG emission reductions would occur and would be achieved, because it's unknown what projects would ultimately be funded. So, for example, part of the grant program, an eligible project would be a high-efficient toilet, irrigation system retrofits, recycled water. All of those would be eligible projects, but depending on which project is ultimately chosen, that would determine what the emission reductions were. But nevertheless, the legislature appropriated $20 million for this purpose, with a front-end requirement that a record be developed that includes a description of the proposed expenditures and how they further the purposes of AB 32, how the agency considered other objectives, and how the agency would document the expenditure results. So part of it was putting on the kind of front-end belts and suspenders to establish a record for it. And then for additional accountability purposes, DWR is going to be developing grant guidelines through a public process. We'll be using currently available methodologies to calculate metrics, while the Air Board will be refining and updating the methodologies to ensure the accuracy. And then the administration will be reporting annually on the outcomes. So we think the legislature's action on the water use efficiency measures is kind of an example of kind of how we would move forward on it.
So it sounds like you're suggesting a joint JLBC kind of process.
Well, I think that under existing law, there's already a requirement that before any expenditures are made, that each department establish a record of how they would meet it. Yes.
Let me shift for a moment to the SB 535 disadvantaged communities compliance issue. My understanding is that a significant portion of that 25% is intended to be absorbed within the low carbon transportation, the clean vehicle program. Do you have some comments on how that would roll out? what's intended
Yes,
there?
Mr. Chairman, the Air Resources Board is working on a paper which we're planning to put out within about 10 days that I think will lay that out with more clarity, but just as a basic preview, we expect that 100% of the money that we're using for demonstration projects for heavy-duty vehicles in the freight transportation area would go into disadvantaged communities, as well as the money from advanced technology demonstration projects, and we're talking about something like a new type of technology for moving freight goods around at the harbors. We're also then looking at ways we can take the light-duty vehicle programs, the CVRP and the demonstration programs, and redirect funds there into disadvantaged communities. And we're going to be putting out some ideas for public comment, because this is not an area where, frankly, there's any good experience to look at. We're inventing this program, but there are ideas out there for putting zero-emission vehicles into ride-sharing programs, into fleets that operate only or primarily in disadvantaged communities, ways of combining funds from other incentive programs that already exist for buying back some of the oldest and dirtiest vehicles with funds from this program to actually allow individuals to move up into a zero or near zero emission vehicle. So there's a number of ideas that have been identified, and we're going to be exploring which of those would be the best way to use the money. We don't have it yet.
I look forward to hearing that. That report will come out before we have our follow-up hearing.
That's the intent.
So we'll be able to have a more thorough conversation, as we will on most of these topics. One additional question regarding methane, which seems to be, the evidence seems to be building that there's significant greenhouse gas emissions associated with methane, and it's everywhere from landfills where it may be leaking and a number of other sources. Where are we on that issue, and where is the technology and the ability to hopefully control for that source?
Methane was identified in the original scoping plan as a target area, but since the original scoping plan, the IPCC has raised its estimate of the potency of methane as a greenhouse gas by about 6 times, a multiple of 6 times. So it's much more serious than we thought it was, and there is a lot of it around. Much of it actually comes from our natural gas transportation system. It's leaks around pipelines and valves and connections and so forth. There's also some associated with production of oil and gas, and as you mentioned, there's landfills. There's also, before things get to landfills, there's agricultural waste and forest waste that are just exposed to the air as things decay and emit methane. Several of the expenditure recommendations that are in the governor's plan target methane, particularly the waste measures that are in the expenditure plan. Our new scoping plan also singles this area out for much more extensive activity, because it clearly is an important focus.
Right. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the dais? Ms. Skinner. And that could be, before you proceed, can I get a show of hands, approximately how many people are wanting to speak? Okay, so quite a few. I'm calculating a time limit. We'll ask everyone to be as concise as possible, but I do understand there's intense interest on this topic. Ms. Skinner.
Thank you. So Department of Finance, and you don't have to answer this, and more that in your response, around how either have we provided our folks that are going to be administering these funds the metrics yet for how they evaluate the proposals for their GHG activities yet. And I think, obviously the focus of the question was because we are hoping that these metrics are used prior to the distribution of funds versus after the fact in terms of the outcomes. And I guess I really would ask Mary whether, do we have are we using a software tool that we're providing the staff in the different departments? Are we, what have we given them?
Well, as of yet, we have not given them the
Okay.
tools that you're
Okay.
asking for. We are hoping that we will get the resources to do that, and that we will be able to move quickly. It is, as I indicated before, this is something that's never been done before, but we think we can do it in a timely fashion, at least to a level of basic understanding and helping the departments walk through what needs to be done. It'll have to be adapted to the different program
Right,
areas.
right.
It's not going to be identical. But at the end of the day, we know that we need to give them something that they can then have at the end of a year, so that they can quickly look at what happened and be able to report. So it's a reporting tool, basically, and I think we can adapt software that exists, but do it in different ways for different programs.
Okay. All right, so before we go to the public comment, really not so much in terms of response, but I'm pleased of the acknowledgement of what a significant role methane plays, and our increasing understanding of, while we have understood landfills as a large source, ag waste, water treatment as a large source, this issue of the leakage within our national natural gas systems is quite significant, and I think it bears us doing a little more, because it could be that we would achieve a far greater reduction by addressing that, whether it's valve or pipe leakage. And again, I don't know what cost estimates on it, but I think it's worth that we really do need to explore that. And I would just finally, and don't know if it'll be this year's plan, but I do think when I look at it, at least our understanding so far, without an updated emissions inventory that would include things like the natural gas leakage, the big things that stick out are transport, obviously, and building energy. And so I guess as we go forward, whether it's this year or over the years in terms of our expenditures, those areas seem to me to need much more attention. And yeah.
All right. Ms. Roberts, how are we doing?
We're doing good.
All right. Nothing you'd like to add? And can I bring you a cup of water, a little coffee?
Some coffee would be
Am I back in your good graces? All right. So I'm going to ask everybody to try it. If you can do it in less than 2 minutes, that would be great, but no more than 2 minutes. And we'll start with Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you. Joshua Shaw with the California Transit Association, representing all your local public transit systems: Santa Monica Big Blue Bus, LA Metro, Metrolink, AC Transit, BART, Santa Clara VTA, Samtrans, Caltrain, et cetera, et cetera. We want to thank the Governor and the Secretary, Chair Nichols, for emphasizing the vital role of public transit in serving Californians, in this case for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's been a long time since we've had a Governor or Secretary who have been so overt about acknowledging the role of public transit. So thank you. We specifically support the Sustainable Communities Implementation Program. The published sustainable community strategies, particularly in the 4 metropolitan areas, call for, frankly, billions of dollars, to get to Chair Skinner's question earlier, in new transit investments, and research by the Transportation Coalition for Livable Communities, which consists of our transit association, the associations for the cities, counties, regional planning agencies, NRDC, EDF, California Alliance for Jobs, Transportation California, the private sector contractors, and the unions that work on transportation projects. That group's research of efforts in the transportation sector worldwide to reduce GHGs shows that when you put more transit overlaid on compact land uses, which combine better access for bicyclists and pedestrians over rehabilitated and complete streets, in corridors, denser corridors that connect housing and jobs and educational centers, those projects obtain greater GHG reductions than if you just did one transit project here or one complete streets project there. In fact, you get compounding effects in the double digits on GHG reductions. So our wish of you would be to find ways to increase the amount of money going to these sustainable community strategies. As Chair Skinner said, $100 million will be spread very thin. We also see the need for a greater regional role, I think, as Assemblymember Gordon called for. And Secretary Kelly mentioned transit operations. That's technically not in the trailer bill. They mentioned transit capital as eligible. Programs that increase transit ridership, that's good. Transit operations is what we think of as paying the men and women to put more transit bus service and rail service out on the street. And finally, on the $50 million rail mod program that many of you asked about, we represent the 13 rail transit operators. We're so far agnostic on the structure the governor has proposed. We're trying to get to a place of consensus, but we appreciate and support the governor's call for additional rail investments, whether connected to high-speed rail or otherwise, and we would ask you to bump up that amount of money as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Kara Martinson on behalf of the California State Association of Counties, also part of a local government coalition. Would concur with the comments of my colleague, appreciate the allocation to the Sustainable Communities Fund. However, we would advocate that local governments have much more potential for greenhouse gas reduction projects outside of SB 375. Very much support Mr. Gordon's AB 1970 that would create a competitive grant fund at the local level for GHG reduction projects in multiple different sectors. Locals have expertise in GHG accounting and metrics. We also have partnerships with regional networks, nonprofits, and have the ability to help create capacity within disadvantaged communities and support increased funding for these purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do like the fact that you're taking an open mic and going one by one. So just feel free to sit down. That way we'll be able to get through it more efficiently. Thank you.
Good morning. Julia Levin with the Bioenergy Association of California. We represent more than 50 local governments, public agencies, and private companies converting organic waste to produce ultra-low carbon, sometimes carbon-negative transportation fuels, renewable energy, and energy storage. We strongly support the proposed funding for CalRecycle and the California Department of Food and Agriculture. Both agencies' proposed programs can provide quantifiable near-term greenhouse gas reductions, including reductions of methane from the dairy industry, from diverted organic waste, and from other sectors. We also support the funding for CAL FIRE, but there we urge one significant change. California forests sequester enormous amounts of carbon, but a severe fire season can emit more carbon dioxide than the entire transportation sector. It's also the largest source of black carbon emissions, 52% of all black carbon. One of the most effective strategies to reduce fire is small-scale forest biomass facilities, sized and located to take forest biomass and reduce fire risk. But there is no funding in the current proposal that's dedicated to forest biomass facilities. So we urge the state to include 20 to 25% of CAL FIRE's funding for small-scale forest biomass facilities. Bioenergy in general can help to address environmental justice impacts in urban communities. It can also help to protect public health and safety and create jobs in very severely economically disadvantaged rural communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Jamie Levin with the Center for Transportation and the Environment in Berkeley, California. And our organization and coalition of member and non-member companies wishes to support the governor's proposal for $200 million for alternative fuels. But in particular, we urge your support for dedicating up to $35 million of these funds over the next 1 or 2 years to leverage federal and regional grants to create centers of excellence for the development of fuel cell and battery electric zero-emission public transit buses. California has been a world leader in the development and demonstration of zero-emission bus technology. Its fuel cell advanced bus demonstration fleet in the Bay Area has operated over 1 million miles and carried over 3 million people, mostly serving people living in economically disadvantaged communities. The development of the centers of excellence will provide triple bottom line benefits to California and our nation by driving down the technology costs through volume procurements, providing zero-emission public transit service and significantly reducing well-to-wheel carbon emissions. California requires the introduction of zero-emission vehicles, including buses. The introduction of transit buses that feature reliable, quiet, clean, and comfortable buses will help reduce vehicle trips and promote transit-oriented development. Therefore, we urge your support for taking the steps necessary to make this technology an everyday reality. Thank you.